June is Youth Month in South Africa, and we're giving away a couple of books, and we're asking the simplest question on the planet. How many years is June 16 celebrating? How many years is the June 16 Soweto Youth Uprising commemorating this year? How many years? I mean, can it get more simple than that? We're just giving this book away. Email us, morninglive@sabc.co.za, morninglive@sabc.co.za. I can give you a clue. There's a 4 in there somewhere. I've just given you the book. No, honestly, I really have. There's a 4 in there somewhere. And another number. All right, so back to Johannesburg. This week, our focus is on being part of the LGBTI community in the country. And to kick off our theme, let's take a look at a conversation between the Morning Live producer IKGOMOTSENG, SEGOPOLO, and Anastacia Tomson. They were in conversation about her latest book titled ALWAYS ANASTACIA, a transgender life in South Africa. Here's how that discussion unfolded.
You titled your book Always Anastacia, a transgender life in South Africa. So what was it about this point in your life that you decided that this is the time for the release of this book?
Well, I think a lot of the impetus for writing the book came in the first instance. I was going through this transition and this change, and people around me were witnessing it, and they were saying things to me like, how are you chronicling this? How are you keeping track of it? Are you doing like a photo diary or a blog or something? And always wanting to be different, I thought, well, I will start writing a book. And, really, like I say, coming back to the idea that I've taken kind of certain incidents and events and encounters, I would have these experiences, and, I would just understand that this is something that people don't experience unless they're trans and unless they're transitioning. So something would happen in an encounter with Home Affairs or an encounter with a doctor, and I'd write about it afterwards. And before I knew it, I was halfway to a full-length book. Transgender people have been around forever, but historically we've always been kind of thrown under the bus. We're almost included as an afterthought. And just as trans people have moved closer towards the spotlight and becoming more front and center in the collective consciousness, I think the timing just sort of lined up very fortuitously. This is the time for trans people to be telling their own stories.
This being your first book, how difficult was it to finish it and then saying, okay, this is the final product, I'm putting it out there?
I'd say that I kind of cheated in that I knew what was going to happen in the story. It was my life. I didn't have to plot it out and determine the story arcs for individual characters and try and foresee where it was going. I had an idea of what I wanted to achieve with the book, and that was 2 things. I wanted for trans people out there who are feeling very alone and who are struggling with identity and who maybe feel like they are rejects or broken or defective because of who they are. I wanted them to find some commonality, and I wanted them to find some solidarity through my story. The second thing that I wanted is for people in society at large who know that trans is a thing, but who kind of equate the entire idea with Caitlyn Jenner, which is very inaccurate. It paints a very unrealistic portrayal of trans experience.
Can you share with us your coming out story?
My coming out story is not one story, because there are a multitude of coming out stories, and this is something I always point out. Even today, I still find myself in situations where I sometimes have to come out to someone. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions when it comes to trans people, is there was one sort of cataclysmic moment in time when everything changed, when you come out and you undergo this transition. And both coming out and transition, for those who choose to go through that process, are in fact processes. It takes a long time. I say transition never ends, and to a large extent coming out never ends as well, because being trans is part of my identity, and I find myself in a lot of situations where I have to disclose that. Obviously the stakes are a little bit lower now, because everyone who's close to me, friends and family, and those people who had so much invested in me, I've sat them down and I've told them. And even that wasn't one singular instance. It was having to make a list of different people that I need to tell and finding the time and the opportunity to break this sort of potentially devastating news to them.
I know that you have practiced as a medical doctor. So my question is, how accessible is healthcare for transgender people in South Africa?
That's one of my pet peeves. It's really difficult for a trans person to access healthcare. And this is why I do a lot of the activism that I do, and I speak out about it, and I try to use my background as a medical practitioner in order to educate and spread awareness amongst other healthcare providers. Because if you're trans, seeking healthcare is difficult, and I'm not just talking about hormones and surgery. When it comes to gender-affirming care, that's the hormones and the surgery, there are 3 public sector centers in this country. Only 3 in the entire country that provide those services. But even accessing general healthcare is difficult if you're trans, because as soon as you walk up to that reception area or that admission area, people want to see ID documents or medical aid cards, or they're asking all kinds of questions. You have to out yourself.
You know, what I like about the book is how you take us through your most intimate and personal experiences. What tips and advices do you have for someone who wants to transition but they don't know how to do that?
It's very difficult to give one-size-fits-all advice, and this comes back to the idea that all trans people are different and we all have our own experiences and our own stories, our own narratives, and they're all perfectly valid. What I think I'd say is find resources and try not to be alone in this, because that's kind of a universalizable aspect, is that if you do choose to come out as trans and you do choose to transition, it's scary and it's difficult, and it will tax you in ways that one could never have anticipated.